In this video, we're going to be talking about one of the most revolutionary heat pump package units on the market. We're going to talk about why this is revolutionary. It's one of the only inverters in the residential space that's out right now. We're talking about the Bosch IDP Premium Inverter Heat Pump Package Unit. We're going to talk about the heat pump tax credits that this thing qualifies for, where it qualifies, and why you should consider this, and why you might not need this system. If you are considering it and you might be wondering if you actually need it, we'll talk about why the system may or may not be the right one for you, but it's an absolute game changer of a system. So we're going to talk about all the different features. We're going to talk about the efficiency ratings, the SEER2 data, and we'll even go to the Energy Star website and kind of go through some of the data there to explain how the tax credit works on this particular heat pump. And that being said, before we get started, if you're tuning in for the first time and you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel. We put out daily and weekly content on how you can get the best HVAC for your home. So if you're in the market for HVAC system replacement and you're trying to find information on the internet, or you're trying to find videos on how to get the best HVAC for your home, that's all we talk about on this channel. And so consider subscribing. It's a great way that you can support the channel. And before we get started, if you haven't done so already, please smash that like button. Or if you want to wait until you find out if you actually like the content, that's fine. You can wait and see if the content is worth smashing the like button for us. But the system we're talking about today, I have pulled up on my screen, so we're going to show you some of this. And this IDP packaged heat pump, the reason this is revolutionary, now, this is technically not the first inverter in a heat pump package. Daikin, Trane, a lot of the big commercial systems have inverter-driven compressors in a package units. The problem is they are for larger commercial systems. So that is changing right now. There are going to be more heat pumps coming to the market. I happen to know that Daikin is coming out with a residential one, because in most parts of the country, you don't run into these except in commercial buildings, and so you see a lot of these package units in smaller, 2,000 to 4,000 square foot spaces. They might be served by a couple rooftop units, because that's how these work. They're ducted rooftop units that connect to a curb and then duct your house. But in certain markets, for example, Phoenix, which is one of the markets we serve, they use a lot of these ducted rooftop units because they were just tied into existing swamp cooler ducts that were left over from years ago, and they've kind of developed as an integral part of existing homes structures, and they use a lot of package units out there. They still use swamp coolers in the shoulder season sometimes, but not very many people. Most people have air conditioning. But the reason this system is so unique is because right now in the package unit space, most systems are going to be single stage and two stage systems when we're talking about systems that are under 5 tons. And so really it's systems that are like under 10 or 15 tons. They are typically non-inverter systems. So they're single stage or two stage systems. Having an inverter option is a game changer, because what it allows you is basically greater comfort in addition to greater efficiency. And if you look at some of the efficiency ratings, and we'll talk about these here, this is basically the difference. If you're wondering what the difference between a single stage and a two stage or a inverter system is, this sentence right here explains it perfectly. It says it's a fully modulating inverter drive system that operates in 1% increments and precisely matches the heating and cooling load. And the way that works is this particular system functions a little different than some other inverters, but they all work on a similar principles, and that there's a few temperature pressure sensors throughout the system that basically operate based on set point. In this particular system, rather than it is non-communicating, which there's a benefit to being non-communicating that I'll talk about in a second, is that this system will ramp up and down based on its suction line pressure, suction line temperature. And so it's trying to maintain a 42 to 45 degree suction line temperature and 130 psi on that suction line pressure. And then on the liquid line, it's trying to maintain a 355, I believe 350 or 355 on the psi for your head pressure. And that is how it basically ramps up and down. And so when it hits that pressure, it starts to modulate, it starts to open and close the electronic expansion valve, and it also ramps up that compressor just to maintain those pressures and those temperatures in those ideal ranges, and it does it in 1% increments. So the thing, when it first kicks on, it's pulling very little power by comparison with a traditional single stage system that ramps up, makes a loud noise usually when it first kicks on, and then ramps up, especially if you have one of your neighbors has one of those loud old noisy systems that's 20 years old. Tell them to buy one of these. They'll be like, well, thanks for the advice. You'll be like, no, thank you for replacing your loud obnoxious system, because these things are whisper quiet. That's one of the big benefits with it. So it modulates up and down, but that's also where the efficiency comes from. Now, the SEER2 data that we'll talk about here in a second, if you look at this on the IDP Premium on this single package unit, it actually is up to an 18 SEER2. The EER2 rating is between 10.6 and 11.2. HSPF2 is between 8.1 and 9.0. If you're not sure what those ratings are, I'll touch on those briefly. We do explain those in another video that I'll make sure to link at the end. But SEER2, or SEER, it's an acronym that stands for Seasonal Energy Efficiency Ratio. And that is basically going to be a measure of cooling performance, while HSPF2 is going to be a measure of heating performance and how it performs in those cold weather months. Now, one thing to note about this tax credit is only eligible in the South, and you know that. And when I say the South, that means the southern states or southern regions from a heating and cooling perspective, right? So all these orange states like Nevada, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Georgia, Florida, think all the hot southern states. Some of these states are humid. Obviously, Texas is hotter than, some parts, but warmer states where cooling is more of a priority from an energy efficiency perspective. This is how you get that tax credit, is by buying a system that qualifies in these markets. So if you happen to be in a market like Phoenix, in Phoenix, this particular system not only qualifies for that, but it also qualifies for an SRP rebate in the amount of $225 per ton of cooling. And so this system is just a great way to take advantage of that rebate. You're going to get a tax credit. In addition, you're going to get a rebate, probably from your local utility provider, but you just have to check with them. But it's going to be whisper quiet. It's going to be a lot more efficient. It's going to save you money on your bills. And again, for a package system where you've traditionally been confined to choosing from a single stage or a two-stage system and not had much options, this is a great system to consider and to have access to. Now, there's a couple other points I want to make and touch on really quick. But before we do that, if you haven't done so already, please make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying this content so far. Again, it's just a free way you can show support, and it's much appreciated. That being said, one thing I wanted to point out is that this system comes, as you can see, in a 3-ton or a 5-ton model. Now, there's something unique about this that's important to consider. It doesn't mean if you need a 4-ton, you can only, you can't get this system. What's cool about this system is you actually factory set or field set the tonnage during the installation and the commissioning process. And so when you're installing the system, if you happen to be, this is going into a smaller home where you only need a 2-ton system, you can actually buy the 3-ton unit, and then you set the tonnage in the field when it's installed. Not you, we do, the installer does it. But when it's getting installed, we set the tonnage for the specific system so that it's ramping at the correct ramping profile when it's running. Now, one thing that's interesting about these is that another thing I want to point out, if you are considering getting this system, they actually prefer a dumb thermostat. They do not want a smart thermostat like an Ecobee or a Nest. Now, if you want an Ecobee or a Nest, that's fine. They'll work with an Ecobee or a Nest, but there's a few features you're going to want to turn off. The biggest one is going to be any of the learning or eco-programmable types of settings where your thermostat just takes over control of your system because it thinks it knows better. That will throw off the way that this system operates, because that system basically the thermostat basically tries to tell it what to do, and basically it'll be climbing in the temperature in your house, and it will, prevent the system from coming on for cooling because it's in eco mode, and do just all sorts of weird stuff. You want a basic dumb thermostat that sends an on signal and an off signal, and if you are using an Ecobee or something, just turn off any of those smart features that make it where it's like a learning thermostat, or it's trying to incorporate its own algorithm, because what you want is this thing to have an on signal, and then it runs for an hour, and it ramps up very slowly, and it's very efficient, and it keeps your house comfortable, and it just kind of hovers around the temperature it's supposed to be at, and then it satisfies that set point. And then when it shuts off, it's actually going to go through a ramp down cycle where it takes, a few minutes to shut off. It doesn't just all of a sudden shut off and stop cooling. It actually ramps down. And so that's one of the nice things about the system. And that's just something you want to consider if you're getting the system installed. It's just something that we like to point out and be aware of, because 90% of the callbacks or the warranty issues on this particular system are almost always in relation to how the thermostat was set up on install day. And if you happen to be in one of the areas we service, like Denver, Colorado, or Phoenix, Arizona, you can actually schedule an appointment with us for free. We come out for free for all first-time customers, whether that's for a service call or annual maintenance, or if you're just looking for an estimate for system replacement. And there's actually a link in the description below where you can actually schedule online at your convenience, as well as an up-to-date list of the cities and states that we service, so you can stay up to date when we start servicing your metro. So we hope you found this content helpful, and if you did, please consider subscribing to the channel and smash that like button for the algorithm. And as mentioned earlier, there's a few videos popping up on the screen right now about heat pump efficiency ratings, as well as a few other videos that YouTube thinks you should watch. So make sure you check those out if you haven't done so already, and we will catch you on the next episode.